Well, once again, welcome to Human Resource Management and specifically to Chapter 1. As you saw in the introduction video, which you should have already watched, I'm Willie Woodridge, the instructor for this class. Just a few words about how these lectures work. I'll generally start out with a brief intro to each chapter, and that will be delivered with me on camera talking just like this. I'll then transition pretty quickly into the slide presentation. I think it is important for you to see an instructor to get the feeling that we're actually in a class. I guess that's the old school part of me, feeling that a class of any kind should include some interaction. I realize that looking at this ugly face can be considered painful interaction, so I transition, as I said, to the slide presentation pretty quickly. It's not fair to ask you to suffer pain in large doses. The slides for the presentation are posted so you can print and follow along if you wish. The lectures are posted so you can print and follow along as well. I tried to incorporate multiple learning approaches, visual, written, audio, etc., to meet your individual needs. You don't have to use them all, but you can pick and choose and combine those that fit your individual study and learning habits. In Canvas, pay attention to modules, quizzes, announcements, assignments, and the discussion tabs. Check them regularly. You will use them each week. And read the documents that I have posted in the introductory week. Read all of them and refer back to them during the semester as the need arises. They will explain the class and guide you through your responsibilities. If you fail to fulfill those responsibilities because you didn't read the documents or didn't understand the documents, you will receive very little sympathy from me at grade time. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, contact me if you have questions, problems, or if you need clarification. Not only am I ugly, I'm not smart enough to be a mind reader either. Talk to me and I can help you. After all, that's what I'm here for. I'm a resource. Resources are of limited value unless you put them to use. Let's have a great semester. So once again, welcome to Human Resource Management. This week, we start the real work. I hope by this time you have mastered at least the basics of Canvas and are ready to dig into the course material. What can you do and what can't you do in organizations? What does a good organization look like? How do we get rid of a worthless employee, and there are some? And how do we keep and reward a good employee, and there are many? Can we discriminate against people? How do we choose who becomes a member of our organization or group? How can we get people to behave in a certain way? Are there jobs that are strictly male or female jobs? How do laws and regulations impact the workplace? How important is pay? How important is training? These are only a few of the endless questions related to people, organizations, and their interaction. Of course, this class is about people and the management of what I call people systems: pay, training, recruiting, selection, legal, etc. This class is about answering all of those questions and more. But I guess it is really more about organizations or groups of people working together. It's about creating an environment in which people and organizations produce a product or service most efficiently and effectively. It's about building a culture that drives the behaviors of individuals towards personal and organizational success. And finally, it's about giving you some insight into the work world that you may not have had prior to taking this class. Chapter 1 of the text talks about the role of human resource management in organizations and how management and people interact. It's an overview of human resource management. It sets the basis for all of the discussions to come in future chapters. It's important. Read and understand it. This lecture will dive a little deeper and expand on the text material and discuss the purpose of a business, success and failure, the perception of HR in organizations, and ultimately end with two topics you will hear repeated over and over in this class: organizational culture and ethics. Please take a look at my bio, which is located in the Modules tab for this week. I've worked in organizations at the bottom and at the top and everywhere in between. I've worked in nonprofit and for-profit organizations. I've worked as an employee and as an executive. In other words, I'm an old man who's been to a lot of places organizationally, not necessarily geographically. I'm not bragging, but I'm merely pointing out that you should be aware of who is talking to you. I am not someone who has spent their career in an educational institution, although there's nothing wrong with that, but it is a different perspective. I come from the perspective of having seen and experienced the successes, failures, and mistakes, and having had the great fortune of contributing to the successes and failures, and having made far more mistakes than I care to count. I don't have a textbook perspective, I have my perspective. Often they are the same, and sometimes different, but in this course you will be able to experience both perspectives and judge for yourself the validity of each. My perspective may not always be right in your judgment, but you will never be able to make that judgment until you hear and compare the different perspectives on your own. That's what learning is all about. I will share with you each week my perspective in the lectures, as well as some of those real-world experiences which have shaped that perspective. I pray you will find them helpful in creating your own unique perspective. After all, unique perspectives are the beginning of innovation. American businesses, and particularly human resource management, needs innovative thoughts and practices to remain competitive in an ever-changing world. Let's go about developing perspectives that will lead to success. Let's go about learning. As I mentioned in my introduction, I will not cover all of the information in the text in these lectures. Generally, I will review highlights and depend on you to read and study the text material to get the details. However, I will on occasion delve further into material in the text if I think it is particularly important or if the text doesn't cover the material to my liking. I will also often expand on the text material to give you something else to think about or to inject real-world experience. Therefore, you should read the text assignment each week and also read or watch the lecture to realize the full potential of the course. What is the primary purpose of any business? Well, it's not to hire people, it's not to help the community, it's not to produce a product or a service. The primary purpose of any business is to make money. The dollars are important. Without them, it doesn't matter what products and services are produced or how useful and good they may be, because without the money, they can't be produced for long. It doesn't matter how many people are employed, because without profits, they won't be employed for long. It doesn't matter how much they help the community, because if they are not making money, they will not be in the community for long. Simply put, that's the purpose of business, and by default, that is the purpose of human resource management. To make money or spend it efficiently defines all business functions, of which human resources is but one. So let's start with the distinction between success and failure. It may seem silly to delve into a distinction between these two terms that seems to be obviously opposites. However, there is indeed a distinction, and in my mind, an important distinction that is lost in many organizations and on many organizational leaders. In business, as in many other areas of life, failure may not be only about bankruptcy or going out of business or closing the doors. That is clearly failure, but in the extreme. Failure is not always about a catastrophic event. Failure is about not becoming what you can become as a business or a company or even a person. It's falling short of potential. In business, the question should not merely be how much did we earn, but how much could we have earned. Success should be measured against potential, not merely performance. Consider an athletic team. Do we measure success merely by attendance figures, or how many t-shirts were sold, or how much money was made, or if the won-loss record is consistently above 500? No, we measure success in athletic programs by championships and exceptional performance. Success is certainly not mere survival. Success is about measuring up to potential. What does that mean in business? Success is about innovation, change, taking risk, and not only living up to potential, but creating potential. Success is about being uncomfortable with the status quo, while survival is about maintaining the status quo. Survival is not about winning, but about not losing. Success is about striving for excellence, while survival is about accepting mediocrity. And as you can see by the slide I've presented here, success and failure is on a continuum. So there's all range of success and failure in between the two endpoints. And with that definition of failure and success, I suspect that HR management has contributed much to the failure of many organizations. That conclusion leads to my concern about the reputation and the practice of HR. The text details some of the negative perceptions of HR on page 7. However, I don't believe that the text delineates the depth of those negative impressions enough. They are widely held and to a certain extent confirmed by the behavior of many HR professionals. HR has an adverse reputation that is deserved. That reputation is one of being bureaucratic and an obstacle rather than a contributor to success. HR often tells leadership what they can't do instead of how to accomplish what they must do. HR is seen as highly tactical and rarely strategic. In other words, HR doesn't create possibilities and potential, but reacts to current realities. I realize that I am very harsh with my criticisms of HR, but I believe that many, not all, HR professionals have a significant journey to become deft business people. I will delve into these concerns in greater detail throughout the remainder of this course. How can HR as a profession overcome these negative perceptions? HR professionals must become leaders in the organization. HR professionals must become strong business people and accept a critical role in strategic planning for the success of the organization. The text indicates that HR operates as advocates of the employee. That is true, but only half true. HR also must act as advocates of the company. HR must sell concern for employees to the company and simultaneously sell concern for the company to employees. HR provides that link between employees, company, community, and market. Failure to fulfill this important role has resulted in the poor HR reputation. The text talks a lot about the task of HR. Activities such as staffing and talent management and development, compensation and rewards, labor relations, etc., are important and deserve attention, but not attention in lieu of strategic concerns. You see, these activities include a myriad of tools that allow HR to accomplish the activities and the task. Knowing how to deploy and when to deploy these tools properly enhances the potential of success. Enhances, but doesn't guarantee success. Sometimes these tools are inadequate or don't work. New tools must be used, or current tools must be used differently. Innovation is as important to success in HR as in any other business endeavor. All HR problems are not just HR problems. They may be sales problems or marketing problems or IT problems. Let me give you a practical example of how an HR problem was really a different problem requiring a different, innovative solution. I was relatively new to HR and working in a small county hospital in central Indiana. The facility was located in a county adjacent to Indianapolis, but still rural enough that most of the county had not been swallowed by its near neighbor. Drive time to the big city was about 30 minutes. I was an HR generalist, meaning that I dabbled in all aspects of HR and had many responsibilities that varied daily. One responsibility that consumed much of my time was recruiting and hiring. We recruited professional positions such as nurses and technicians, but hired non-skilled positions such as housekeeping and the cafeteria. The recruiting and hiring problem was in the professional ranks, and specifically with nurses. The medical community was in the middle of a severe shortage of nurses. All organizations were feeling the pain of the shortage, but it was particularly acute in small hospitals and clinics. It was difficult to compete with the larger hospitals, which tended to scoop up all the new and the experienced nurses. And it wasn't hard to understand how they did it. They paid well with good benefits, although we paid competitively and also offered competitive benefit packages. They offered the latest equipment, procedures, and cutting-edge research. We merely treated patients. They were surrounded by the metropolitan culture that appealed to young professionals. We were surrounded by cow fields. They had a reputation and prestige. Many people had never heard of Johnson County Memorial Hospital. We were clearly recruiting from a disadvantaged position. Our recruiting possibilities were not strong, particularly in reference to nurses. Keep in mind, in business and particularly in HR, we can't list the problems as reasons something can't be achieved and then give up. We list the problems as challenges and then find a way to overcome them. Good business people realize that to be successful, these problems must be overcome for the organization to survive. Recognizing this, my boss assigned the problem to me and instructed, go out and recruit some nurses fast. So let's summarize the problem. We needed to fill open nursing positions. The marketplace was experiencing a shortage of nurses. We were at a recruiting disadvantage. We were much smaller than most of our labor market competitors. Since we were small, it was perceived that we paid less and had inadequate benefits. We were located in a rural community approximately 30 miles from the city. We didn't perform prestigious or cutting-edge procedures. We didn't have on-site research capabilities. We didn't have the cutting-edge equipment. Our environment and culture were marked by rural and simple values. We didn't offer metropolitan cultural activities within our immediate community, and no one knew our name. My boss also informed me that there was an excellent recruiting opportunity coming up in a few weeks. Indiana University Medical Center was conducting a job fair at their nursing school for 2 days. During this time, recruiting hospitals and clinics would set up displays with representatives to meet students at all levels of training and present the advantages of working in their respective organizations. Our major immediate labor market competitors, all of the big boys, would be present, but major organizations from surrounding states would also be in attendance. It was clear that my presence to present Johnson County Memorial Hospital was not optional. What would you do to prepare for this daunting recruiting assignment given the problems listed above? On the first day of the job fair, I reported in and received my directions and my assigned location in the hall. I set up my small table and folding chair between two of our largest hospital competitors. Their display included television monitors, videotapes, trinket giveaways, and generally gaudy but very effective displays. My small table was dwarfed by my competitors, and as long lines of students formed at their table, no one seemed to notice me. I realized that the task was perhaps more daunting than I expected. What would you do to prepare for the second day? Although there are many answers to both of the situations described above, let me share with you my solution. To prepare for the first day, I analyzed the problem and decided that this wasn't an HR problem at all, but it was really a marketing problem. The public and nurses either didn't know about our hospital or misunderstood our hospital. If they didn't know about us, I must find a way to introduce us. The job fair offered an excellent opportunity to facilitate that introduction. I just needed to develop the proper tools. I decided that initially I needed a brochure that would market our hospital in a very positive way. To develop the brochure, I began by listing all of the marketing issues as I have listed them here. I set about turning negatives into positives and described the many positives as primary reasons to consider a career in our organization. For example, instead of stressing that we were 30 miles from the city, I stressed that abundant shopping was nearby. Instead of focusing on a rural community, I stressed that we were near the city, but one didn't have to contend with the traffic, crime, and other negatives found in large metropolitan areas. I emphasize that we were minutes from nationally recognized research facilities and had members of our medical and nursing staff with strong ties to these research and teaching facilities. I promoted our simple, uncomplicated environment as one perfect for starting a career and learning the basics of nursing. And finally, I listed our pay and benefits as competitive. The brochure offered a map demonstrating our proximity to the city and a list of cultural events offered by the local college. To further define our culture and our community, I listed churches in the area and also an abundance of social clubs and activities that may appeal to younger people. I solicited input from many sources in the hospital and had the prototypes read and critiqued by several different people. It was a team effort. The brochure was successful and offered a wonderful but truthful view of our organization. However, I did not anticipate the high-dollar technical recruiting displayed by my competitors. Therefore, during the first day, no one took my brochures. On the first day, I went home discouraged but not beaten. I gathered some folks together at the hospital and presented this new problem. How do I get students to take my brochure, let alone read it? We decided we needed an incentive. We asked the question, what do young nursing students want more than TVs, fancy tables and displays, and glitter? The answer was obvious. Food. Students want food. That afternoon, I went to a local bakery, and with the owner, we designed a cookie that was about 5 or 6 inches in diameter, couldn't be eaten in one bite, and big enough to be seen by others. And around the perimeter of the cookie was written in bright colors, Johnson County Memorial Hospital. I ordered several dozen cookies. The next morning, I arrived at my lonely table between my opulent competitors. I placed my brochure on the table next to my enticing cookies. The first student approached the table and asked, "Can I have one of your cookies?" I smiled and replied, "If you take one of my brochures, let me explain what we have to offer at Johnson County Memorial Hospital while you eat." She took the cookie, I explained the brochure, and turned to the next observing student. Soon I had students lined up at my table. I gave away all of the cookies and all of the brochures. More importantly, nearly every nursing student at Indiana University School of Nursing knew about our hospital. They were actually going to the dorms and sending their friends over to get some of our magnificent cookies and brochures. Now, I don't know how many nurses we recruited from that, but certainly a few. But our name was well ingrained at that nursing school for the future. You see, this problem was both tactical and strategic. We had to fill positions now, but we also had to fill nursing positions in the future. We couldn't do it with traditional HR tools, but applied normal business marketing skills to an HR problem to meet the short-term tactical and long-term strategic needs of the organization. Finally, this situation demonstrates the critical importance of HR to the success and even the survival of a business. Hospitals can't run without nurses. HR must provide those nurses. The future of that organization rested on the creativity, innovative strategies, and out-of-the-box actions of HR. So good or bad, where does HR fit into any organization? Well, the answer to that question is not so easy. It depends on the organization. The HR professional is in the organization and the value placed on HR principles by the rest of management in that organization. However, when properly used, HR is the protector, facilitator, and manager of 2 of the 4 assets defined in the text that are necessary for success. Those assets are physical, financial, intellectual property, and human. HR is intimately involved in intellectual property. HR controls the process for producing intellectual property and involved in human assets. The nurses in the previous example represented both intellectual property and human assets. Intellectual property and human assets combine to create a value that can exceed all of the physical and financial assets and even create more physical and financial assets in the future. HR directs the management of both human and intellectual assets. Can any organization realize success without adequate human and intellectual assets? I suspect not. And I suspect that when organizations fail, it is due to a lack of human and or intellectual assets or the mismanagement of the available assets. It is my proposition that failing organizations run out of intellectual and human assets before they run out of financial or physical assets. Think about it. Do you agree? The text launches into a discussion of core competency and organizational culture. These topics will be discussed further in several other chapters. Both are very important to the survival and the success of the organization, but the culture of an organization can greatly impact the required core competencies of the employees. The text gives a definition of culture as consists of shared values and beliefs that give members of an organization meaning and provide them with rules of behavior. Now, I'm not sure culture always gives employees meanings, but it certainly gives them rules of behavior. A shorter definition of culture that I have heard from several sources is simply how we do things around here. So how does culture impact the competencies of employees and the organizational core competency? Let me give you an example. I worked for RCA Corporation in Bloomington, Indiana. This was the final assembly facility for RCA televisions and employed nearly 4,000 employees. The hourly workers were represented by the IBEW union, which was very strong and militant. There was a great deal of distrust between employees and union and management. Management was sure that employees and the union were out to beat the system and didn't want to work. Employees added little value other than their manual labor and in the eyes of management. Employees were closely supervised, ensured that they did the work and did it properly. On the other hand, employees were certain management was out to get them, so employees would do no more than necessary and agreed to in the union contract. What do you suppose management looked for when hiring and evaluating employees? Management valued employees who would tend to work regularly, not cause a problem, keep ideas and opinions to themselves, and would remain somewhat invisible. Employees who thought for themselves, held opinions, and could communicate those opinions need not apply. I also worked for Nestle USA in a facility that produced pasta, sauce, and pizza. The organization was structured around teams, and managers and employees worked closely together to solve problems and plan for the future. The involvement of employees in making decisions and running the facility without direct supervision was by design and valued by all. What do you suppose management in this facility looked for when hiring and evaluating employees? First, the interview process in the RCA facility was a simple interview that may last 30 minutes if the interviewer was slow. The Nestle interview took several days and required a direct interview by at least 3 managers and interaction with employees. Applicants were screened for their ability to express themselves and communicate effectively. We looked for team skills and informal leadership skills in all employees. We wanted people who would participate and who would value the work relationship. In other words, people skills were important. Job skills could be and would be taught. Without people skills, employees could not contribute effectively in the team environment. The culture at the RCA facility developed over several years as a reaction to the many events in the history of that facility, including the union intervention. The culture was a result of uncontrolled evolution in which no one saw fit to intervene. The culture at the Nestle facility was designed before the facility opened its doors. It was a product of strategic planning and intervention when the culture appeared to be in jeopardy. In other words, the culture was created and maintained as a high business priority. HR had a significant role in both the creation and the maintenance of the Nestle culture. Which organization would you rather work in? Does culture impact competencies valued? If cultures can be created, they can be recreated or uncreated. The old saying is, you get what you pay for. In relative dollars, RCA paid higher than Nestle. You don't get what you pay for. You get what you settle for. RCA settled for mediocrity, and Nestle strived for excellence. This example also serves to demonstrate there are an infinite number of cultures. Cultures vary from company to company, and I dare say no two are the same. Suffice it to say, there is no one right culture are one culture that should be copied. Finally, we must acknowledge that culture and ethics are intimately connected as well. Let me give you a real-life example. I worked for a company in a rural community in North Carolina that by all definitions was very successful. It was marked by strong leadership in which HR was considered a very important role. The facility had a great deal of autonomy from the corporate headquarters located in Indiana. From an HR standpoint, we were very different from the rest of the organization. The rest of the company were not very innovative in terms of HR, and HR leadership in the corporate office was dedicated to the status quo. In short, we had developed and maintained a culture very different from the remainder of the organization. In other facilities, employees were expendable, partially because all other facilities were highly unionized. In our facility, employees were important to our success. The desire for our facility to remain non-union, even at the corporate level, allowed us to create and maintain a different culture. One day I received a call from my boss in the corporate office. Ken instructed me that we would be opening up a second shift in one of our manufacturing operations. This would require the hiring of about 30 people to work second shift. He told me I needed to start planning for the interview process and must have the individuals on board in approximately 60 days. He further indicated that the second shift would be in place for about 6 months. The obvious question which I posed was, what happens after 6 months? His response was, well, obviously the people will be laid off. The next obvious question was, how am I supposed to hire 30 people when they know they will be laid off in 6 months? His answer was indeed distressing, but also pointed to very divergent cultures. You just don't tell them when you hire them, was Ken's answer. He said this without hesitation, and as if the answer was so obvious that it didn't even deserve consideration. My response was, Ken, I can't and won't do that. Ken's response was simple. This is not a request, it's an order. And if you fail to carry it out, I'll find someone to replace you to do it. Is this an ethical question? What would you do? My response was to absolutely refuse to hire anyone under those conditions. Furthermore, I told Ken that if he needed to fire me, he should do so immediately, because while I was in my job, we would never hire under false pretenses. I knew unequivocally that given the culture in our facility, our leadership team would stand behind me and also refuse to participate in the staffing project. After much arguing and many threats, Ken backed down and we sought a different solution. 2 different cultures existed in one company. One forbid treating people in such a deceitful manner, while the other culture saw it as a means to an end. One culture saw it as unethical, while the other saw it as a normal way to do business. Culture impacts ethics. However, there is another ethical dilemma at play in this example: personal ethics versus the ethics of the organization. At times, these two may come into conflict. Rather than violate my personal ethics, I would have sacrificed my job. I can always get a new job, but once sacrificed, ethics are lost. HR faces such dilemmas perhaps more frequently than other professions. Find your values. Establish your ethics. Personal integrity requires you to adhere to those regardless of the personal cost. That's what makes us human. Finally, let me say a quick word about future challenges for HR management. The text discussion starts on page 17 and lists challenges in many different areas. It's a good discussion that is thorough and accurate. Keep in mind that challenges are not static. They change, they evolve, and new challenges always come forward. Challenges must be met and solutions must be found. Unfortunately, many organizations, just like people, struggle to recognize challenges in a timely manner and then struggle to find solutions. If you ignore them, they do not go away. They only grow bigger and more complex. Our challenge this semester is to learn about human resource management, business, and organizations. Please help me help you learn. Give me feedback about what's working and not working. Give me feedback about what you don't understand or when you need help. Let me know if you are struggling with a challenge, be it schedule, material, etc. I can't help if I don't know, and I want to help.